We are returning from closed session. Good evening and welcome to the Lakeport City Council meeting for Monday, December 4th. So we wrote this. Are we going to do roll call, Kelly?
Sure. It looks a little different today.
I forgot if we wrote it as a special meeting.
So, Mayor Matina?
Here.
Councilmember Spur?
Present.
Councilmember Parnett?
Here.
Councilmember Turner?
Here.
And Councilmember Barnes is absent.
Okay. So I'm just going to go ahead and take public comment. If anyone wants to speak on anything not on the agenda tonight, is anyone here for something other than an agenda item? Okay, if not, we're going to move right into our agenda. First, we have a general discussion on the proposed ordinance to permit and regulate commercial cannabis activities within the city of Lakeport. Kevin?
Good evening, Madam Mayor.
Good evening.
Good evening, honorable council members. The need for this ordinance arises from the passage of Prop 64 by the California voters last November, and then also the associated state legislation, most notably SB 94, which provides local jurisdictions some control of the regulation of commercial cannabis, but also sets a deadline the end of this year to get those regulations in place. As your council will recall, we brought to your body at the previous council meeting a draft commercial cannabis ordinance. You guys set a formal public hearing date for the consideration of that ordinance for December 19th. However, at your request, the topic was placed on this evening's agenda to allow for additional opportunity for the public to comment, as well as to clarify and provide some information to you based on your questions from the November 21st hearing. These discussion items are outlined in the prepared staff memo. They consist of clarification on the issue of storefront retail activities for commercial cannabis, information on the impact of creating a special cannabis overlay district, crime statistics from other communities that already have some retail sales. In addition to those clarifications, there are also a few items worthy of discussion based on the recently issued state guidelines published for that were brought to, that were published. What was that, David? The end of
November 17th.
November 17th. November 17th. The emergency provisions from state legislative bodies that will be regulating cannabis, and then also some worthy items that were brought up by Councilwoman Turner that I think are worthy of discussion this evening as well. So I'll leave it there, and then however you guys want to approach this, we can take public comment and then come back to each of those issues outlined and answer any additional questions that may not be there as well.
Okay. Do we want to start, where do you guys want to start?
Do you think maybe you should give a review of what we had previously kind of had a consensus on here and then go from there and see if there was any, because we didn't have a lot of public input. Like we said, that we weren't necessarily in favor of like a lounge, for example.
Right, right.
And that was, and we were considering C3 and industrial for possible retail. We weren't opposed to delivery. I mean, we weren't opposed to retail yet. We questioned the 5-pound limit for retail. Maybe it should be 10. We discussed that. And then outside of that, we decided that we didn't want if we were going to involve C2, we didn't want C2 down on North Main, and we didn't want it in the shopping center, mainly in the industrial complex that was in with C3 and industrial and C2 possibly. And I think that's kind of where we were. There wasn't any major decisions.
Well, yeah, I think a couple of the things that we were unsure on was some of the zoning and if we wanted retail or no retail. Right. And so we were going to have Chief bring back some information with some details. I think George had requested that. We all agreed. So I don't know if we want to have Chief share anything maybe that he has. And so the idea of this was to kind of clarify and make sure we have all the information and give the public another chance to bring any input to us. Chief, do you have anything you want to start with?
I can.
Okay,
As I recall, there was actually two, George had a kind of a request that was kind of related on driver's license. I don't actually have an answer for that part of it right now. The other request was crime stats from other communities that may have marijuana sales locations. We did put out, I believe, 7 letters to other jurisdictions in the North Coast region that are kind of close to us, that have current marijuana sales locations, and we've determined that one of those 7 actually doesn't have any. We've gotten a return from one jurisdiction. We're waiting 5 more jurisdictions to get back to us. So with that, I'll go over the info I have from the jurisdiction that we did get a return on, and that one was Arcata. They actually have 2 locations in their city. So they provided me with the location histories, which I requested for 3 years, January of 2015 through current date. That's the time we put the letter, so essentially it's 3 years. One of their locations, and I just kind of went through and broke it down, had 5 alarm calls, 1 vandalism, 1 disturbance of the peace, 2 thefts, 2 burglaries, 3 suspicious circumstances, 1 suspicious vehicle, 9 miscellaneous type calls, and 9 patrol checks. The other jurisdiction, the other location in that same jurisdiction had 2 thefts, 2 vandalisms, 7 alarms, 1 non-marijuana drug arrest, 1 attempted burglary, 2 911 calls, 1 was accidental, 1 was unknown circumstances, 1 disturbance of the peace, and then it looks like 20 miscellaneous calls with a mix of various things, mainly field interviews, suspicious vehicle, and just miscellaneous type calls. So that's what's been sent back to me at this point from the one jurisdiction. I hope to have 5 more reporting before the next council meeting.
And that was over a 3-year period, though.
Yes, sir. I just did a general request for 3 years. I figured that was kind of a good number to go with.
okay.
Anecdotally, from your experience, how does that compare to any other retail store of a comparable size?
You know, it's hard to say. I don't actually know the sizes of these stores, but I can tell you we've got commercial businesses in our town where we'd have well over 100 thefts, you know, depending on the type of business it is.
Mhm.
If it's shoplifting, and we could have upwards of 100 or more. It's, you know, it's not uncommon for alarm calls at businesses. We get, you know, commercial alarm calls on a kind of a regular basis from various different businesses. I haven't actually sat down and tried to compare it to anything that we have currently. I'm just going from my recollection, but you know, I could see, you know, certain places where we could have similar numbers of calls over a 3-year period. I would have to do more research to really kind of compare it in more detail, but I would say I'm sure we have businesses where it wouldn't be uncommon to have a lot more thefts or burglaries, 911 calls, miscellaneous calls, things of that nature.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Chief?
Well, I would just say that I know that places like Grocery Outlet and like Lakeview Market in Lucerne, if we only had 5 alarm calls and 2 thefts in 3 years, I would be, you know, dancing on cloud 9, because that seems like an extremely low number, and I don't think that looks like a very big police impact compared to the grocery stores that you have to deal with, and Kmart and things like that. So I appreciate the getting out and doing that. But yeah, I think that kind of almost puts to rest some of the issues that we're not going to have that much of an impact for retail. But that's another subject.
Okay, anyone from the public?
I have some information for you guys.
Okay, can you state your name for us?
My name is Kimberly Chilcutt, and I am the creator of Hummingbird Lane All Natural. I am a cannabis medicinal company. May I?
You want to pass those out?
Yes.
Okay.
I only have 6, so it's just some information on what I do. I was looking at your ordinance here, your proposed ordinance on manufacturing standards. And you talk about chemical synthesis, volatile solvents, extraction and chemical synthesis. You're missing a whole group of manufacturing with this, me being one of them. I am an all-natural company. I manufacture with vegetable glycerin, all-natural vegetable glycerin as well as organic vegetable glycerin. In the information I gave you, there is some information in the back about vegetable glycerin. It's non-toxic, it's biodegradable. There's no waste with what I do whatsoever. I have no impact on my neighborhood at all. I receive all my shipments at the UPS store. Like I said, I have no waste. I infuse cannabis and glycerin to make a tincture. The cannabis that's left over is my waste, but it's green waste and it's biodegradable. There's no hazmat. I make topicals. That's simply a variation of butters and oils in a crock pot that melt. They get put into a container. So manufacturing isn't always with a solvent. I personally don't believe in solvents. If you can't take mama cannabis for what it is and make medicine out of that, leave it alone. I do live within the city of Lakeport. I am zoned R1. I'm trying just to get my manufacturing permit before, at least a week before the first of the year, so I can apply for my temporary permit with the state. I have been a business registered with the state of California since 2015. I have an EIN number. I pay the lovely federal government the 1022, which is tax, or you're getting taxed on money that is legally ill-gotten, but they still want their taxes, which is fine. I'm good. I do everything I can to be in accordance with the law. That's one thing, because there's a flaw in your manufacturing. You're not taking into consideration. Vegetable glycerin is not the only non-solvent, non-toxic carrier. There's honey, there's agave. They have outlawed alcohol because that you get into DEA, alcohol, tobacco, firearms, that kind of thing. But I don't want to be cut out of what's going on here because you weren't aware that manufacturing is more than just a solvent, a CO2, a BHO, butane. There's other things, like what I do leaves no footprint. No.
So are you saying that you're doing this type of manufacturing in the home and you're looking for a permit to do that?
I'm a micro business. It's me and my husband. That's it. That's all we do, and we help people.
But you don't have a commercial?
No. I do it at my house. Well, I'm going to be doing a clean room in the garage, but instead of spending all that money on a clean room right now, I'm waiting to see which way you guys go, because that's going to cost me about $25,000. And it's going to be a room within the garage. It's not attached to the garage. And the garage, it shares a roof with the house, but it's a modular, and they didn't put a wall between the garage and the modular. It's actually the outside wall of the modular and then the garage.
Okay. So this would be our residential policy. Kevin, does this fit into our residential policy in any way?
Not currently, we don't allow any commercial, we haven't proposed to allow any commercial manufacturing in there. I mean, I can look really quickly, home occupation wise.
I couldn't find anything. Now, maybe I wasn't looking in the right spot. I've read a lot of ordinances and code sections the past few days, but I couldn't find anything that said anything about manufacturing in your home. But if you think about it, it would be, if you take the cannabis aspect out of it for just a moment, it would be no different than manufacturing a soap. Soaps use glycerin, or, manufacturing.
Well, what are you doing with the end product? Is it for you, for your house, or you're selling it?
Wholesale. And I donate a great deal to our veterans.
Okay.
Kimberly, when you apply for the state license, which license type are you going to apply for?
Medicinal.
I know, but what number? Is it type 6?
Well,
type
well,
7?
there's, in your information, it's gonna show your licensing. There's, IM type 6, type 7 is the chemical.
Well,
type
type 7
six
is the
is
volatile
The
solids.
volatile, type
Right.
6 is infusion, and that's what I do, I infuse.
So type 6 is non-volatile
Exactly.
manufacturing. It also, with the new regulations, we have that type N, but that doesn't really sound like it fits you perfectly because that's the manufacturer that takes the extracts and creates the products
No,
from
no, no,
that.
I'm considered, in your information I gave you, I am considered a cannabis concentrate. And this is where the confusion comes in. When people who know what concentrates are, they think of concentrates as a BHO or a distillate that's gone through a closed loop.
Mhm.
They're not thinking of a concentrate as I'm infusing cannabis into vegetable glycerin, and I'm concentrating the glycerin with the cannabis. And to be honest with you, I'm very thankful the state did that, because if they had put me in an edible category, I'd be out of business.
So are you a type N or a type 6?
Well, I'm gonna be several. I'm gonna be, I think I have to get 3 different licenses.
Okay.
I have to get the medicinal use, the type 6, and I think it's type N.
So you'll be both a type 6 and a type N medicinal.
Yes.
Okay.
And on my bottles, it will say, if you're only medicinal and they're not adult recreational use, on your labels, it has to say medicinal use only. I don't just produce these and sell them to dispensaries and that. I help a lot of people with cancer that have no money, elderly, that just want to feel good.
Yeah, I bet. I understand. How does that fit, Maria?
Well, what I'm wondering is, the reason behind placing a number of these manufacturing licenses or limiting them to our more industrial areas is because we're going to have some strict security standards and things that will protect that permit holder.
I got that covered. I'm gonna have a room inside of the garage, so on the outside of the garage door will be a security door with a keypad.
Okay.
On the inside, the room itself will have another keypad security door. The room will only have ventilation, it will be windowless. And I will have security cameras. I will, that'll be going above and beyond what the state will require me. But to be quite honest with you, I'll do anything I have
The
to.
state does have those camera requirements as well.
Not for me, I'm a micro business. I have, if you have somebody that wants to copy this,
Well,
here's all
micro
the
business is
regulations.
actually a type 12 license though. That's not a type 6.
Not for cannabis, not for
Well,
cannabis. In
this-
terms of how they're gonna, my fee schedule, how many employees I have and how much money I make over a 3-year period qualifies me as a micro business in the Cannabis Bureau's eyes.
You mean like a small business?
Yes.
Okay, so yeah,
There's
let's not get that
micro,
confused,
there's
because a
small.
micro business is actually a type 12 that includes cultivation, manufacturing, distribution, and retail, and that's not what you're going for. You're like more of a cottage type, like a small business.
I'm a craft.
But a type 6.
Yeah,
And-
I'm very
and-
small. I don't anticipate getting huge. If I ever do get employees, it'll be maybe 1 or 2. And again, I want to use my veterans and people services. You know, I want to give back to my community. I just want to help.
So do people come to you to buy it?
The
No,
retail will be part of the
absolutely
type
not.
6. Yeah, so that would be,
No.
it's an interesting situation. And-
Nobody knows where I live. I deliver.
That's one of the things that I found very interesting as this process goes along, is that there are a number of, there are no cookie cutter businesses really. As this industry has developed, people have developed it individually as to what works for them and their clients. But simultaneously, we've got this state regulatory system, which is so, even when they came out with these draft regulations, the first thing that you read from the state is, these are going to change again.
Yeah.
And you know, before that, we didn't have the N's and the P's. Those actually came from, they originated in the original regulations, but now they've been integrated into the types of licenses. So it's very difficult to navigate where we want to go as a city, given all the different variables, because it makes a whole bunch of different parts moving at one time on an unstable playing field, which would be consistent with where the state's going. So while I can totally appreciate, I'm thankful that you've actually come in and talked about your specific business and how it has developed and how, to meet the needs of your clients. But it's just it's an example of the caution that we're going to need to take as a council, I think, as we proceed.
There are so many nuances. I feel so bad for you guys. You were trying to come up with procedure, protocol, ordinances on an industry that frankly, you don't know very much about. I've been entrenched in the industry, so I've seen all these little nuances come up, like with concentrates. At first, it was your old-fashioned ice water bubble hash, and then it turned into BHO, and then here came distillates and closed loop. Now, glycerins, honey, and agave, they've always been around in some form. Oh, another non-solvent, MCT oil. It's a derivative of coconut oil. Tastes awful, but people do use it. But there's all these nuances that, how are you guys going to know about these things?
We don't necessarily need to know all of them, but when the state keeps changing the rules, it makes it very difficult for us to figure out where we all fit in.
Exactly, and what to do, and okay, am I on this side of the law right now? Am I on this side of the law? Am I
Right.
going to go to jail? I'm doing my best.
Well, and we're pressed for time, so we're trying to come up with something on the conservative side that we can start with and then keep working on it and grow from there, because we don't have enough time to do a full assessment of how
No, you
all of
don't.
these different things are gonna affect, our building inspector, our police chief, our fire chief, our planning department. It's a lot to take in, and cities are really struggling.
They
with
are,
it.
and the state did us a great service, but they did you a great disservice. You were stuck with the January 1st deadline. We're not. We have to get all of our application information together, file a template application, which is the last page in your folder, that has to be signed by my city saying I'm getting a permit. They have given us until July 2018 to get our hard permits, come up with the money, because they're still don't know exactly how much they're going to charge us. And then after that, we can get 90-day extensions.
Well, and I can tell you, we've never looked at manufacturing in residential zones. So I don't know where.
Think of it as an infusion.
I completely understand the
The only
process
machine
and
I
what you're
use
saying.
is a crock pot. That's it.
Let me give you an analogy. We have all kinds of events in Lakeport constantly on Main Street and all over the county, and we're required to have a health inspection to protect the public safety because we don't know what's going on. You cannot cook food at home unless it's a special cottage business, but generally speaking, there's certain safety guidelines that protect the public from a massive infestation or an infection of some kind because somebody didn't have the proper setup, the proper inspection, and a commercial kitchen. And so most all of the time when we have commercial caterers, they have to have a commercial kitchen which is inspected regularly by the county health department to make sure that the public safety is protected. If you have little businesses helter-skelter all over the place and they're in residential areas and I'm only doing infusions and I'm only doing this and I only got it infected with some botulism and I only killed like 10,000 people, it sounds crazy, but the fact is that we're in a position where the public safety and for the long time and in perpetuity needs to be protected. And so that when we're looking at these areas and the licenses and the inspection and the protection and the surveillance, it needs to be pretty nailed down. It can't be, just helter-skelter thrown around in different areas and say, well, I got this figured out. I have a special way of doing it. That's not going to be that simple to go in and do a case-by-case basis of all these different things. So I'm just giving you the health department example of how it goes. If you don't have a commercial kitchen, then you're not going to be open. You can't have a restaurant if you don't have an inspection, and you have to have all these provisions met, and you have to have the right kind of sinks and the sewer and all this stuff. It's a lot more complicated to open a restaurant than just say, hey, I'm just going to do infusions and it's all natural and it's all going to go down the drain and I'm just going to take the green waste and dump it and everything's going to be fine. It's not that simple, is what
I
I'm
know
saying.
that, that's why the health department is in control of my permits, and the health department will be coming in to check my facility.
I'm just saying that's one aspect of it. I was just giving you an analogy of
I
how
don't do
complicated.
food, I am very careful when I process, I'm hooded up, I'm masked up, I'm gloved up, I'm in a clean room as I can get it environment. I take very, very deep care with what I do. All of my products are full spectrum lab tested for mold, pesticide residuals, everything else, heavy metals, all the poisons. I only supply clean meds.
Yes, okay, so Kevin, do you have a comment from a planning perspective?
We've never looked at aspects of manufacturing or any portion of this ordinance for any residential type zoning. We did have some questions at the last meeting, and then conversation I had with Councilwoman Turner in regards to, maybe needing to look a little closer at type N and then also type P, which is for manufacturers that only package or repackage cannabis products or label or relabel the cannabis product container, et cetera, very minor, small type manufacturing. And then kind of looking at, appropriate zoning, but I don't think that was ever, we're ever looking at permitting that in residential.
If I may, the grows that you're gonna permit in the city of Lakeport will have a much larger impact than I ever will. The only waste I have is cannabis after it's infused and the water that comes out of the crock pot. That's it. There's nothing else. There's no machinery. There's nothing. These two hands, that's it. I have literally no impact on my neighborhood. As far as my neighbors know, I have one over here and one up there. We're an older couple with 2 dogs that bark at the deer. That's it. And I will take every precaution. I will jump through whatever hoop you want me to. Anything. As long as I can do what I do. If you move me to commercial, I'm done. I can't afford it. I give too much away. And like I said, the health department does. I'm serious, you guys need to download this because it has a lot, it's everything. It's not just what I do. It's growers, it's labs, it's everything. Fee schedules, it's everything. It's very informative and it breaks everything down. When it talks about infusion, it talks about glycerins and oils and butters. It's really comprehensive. Well, as comprehensive as they can. And this good right now at this point. Yes, until something else pops in their head.
Okay, well, thank you. You've given us something else to talk about. Kevin, we're gonna add something?
I just, we do have provisions or ordinance through home occupations, but the biggest linchpin there as far as this is because of all the different state regulations is we also have a specific condition for any home occupation. Is it shall not involve any structural alterations of the dwelling, and the entrance to the home occupation room shall be from within the dwelling, and it has some very specific provisions of keeping it residential. So my only concern would be in looking through those state requirements and what all the different provisions are going to put on you.
Would a
Are
room
those-
in a room take care of that?
Well, that's going to be a structural alteration to an existing residential building. Those are things.
It's not touching me. If it's literally just in the middle of the garage like a box and not attached to the wall or the ceiling, would that be considered an alteration to the residence?
Well, it's an alteration of the residence. The question is that altering the residential use of the residence?
Oh, it's the garage, it's not, I don't want to do this in my home. I want it.
So that makes it, you're making a very good point in that through this dialogue, what I'm seeing is that we have to take a look at the state regulations as well as our current zoning ordinance to see where the compatibilities are and where the conflicts are. And if there are conflicts, why are they there? Are we going to keep them there? So it's actually helpful because it's something that we haven't considered yet. But just like all the other moving parts and pieces, it's going to take an awful lot of consideration to make sure that as we move forward, we're creating a policy that is protecting the public health and safety as well. Not that I'm saying you threaten it at all, but just
Oh, I understand, Jim.
just making sure that the minimum health and safety standards and safety to the public neighbors and all of that, all of those values that are at the forefront when we make policy are also considered as well. So it's actually quite a complicated process we still have before us.
Yeah.
And it's not an easy ordinance for us to move forward with.
If it helps to make you, for lack of a better term, feel warm and fuzzy about giving me a permit in a residential area, make it strict. No off-street parking. I have to have surveillance. I have to have security doors. I have to have this. I have to do that. I mean, make it as stringent as you want so that you feel good about giving me a permit so I can continue helping people. That's all I want to do. And I want to do it here. I love Lakeport. I'm new to Lakeport. I've only been here like 3 years, but it's the greatest little hamlet on the lake ever. I love it. And I want to be a part of the community. Thank you.
Thank you. Who else would like to speak? Come on up.
Stan Jones again. I live in Lakeport. I still feel that we don't need storefront commercial operations in the city of Lakeport. If you folks end up going to some sort of sales in the city, I could live with the delivery sales, but not happily. In listening to Chief Rasmussen, I don't know, last week or the last meeting or the meeting before, he made a comment, I believe, to the effect that you didn't know, but you foresaw more problems with storefront operations versus delivery operations. Am I correct in what I thought I heard?
I believe what I commented was I felt that the storefront operation would be a bigger generator of calls for service.
Right. That is basically what I'm getting at. Several times through all of these meetings that you've gone on, continually or commenting about the lack of public input. It's true, it's sad that there's not more people coming in for it or against it. However, give some thought to the fact that police officers, firemen, utility companies, medical people, whether they believe in it or not, are not going to come in here and publicly state yay or nay. There's job security issues there. So you need to look at that privately. If you're talking to one of your neighbors or whatever, I'm sure that they would probably give you that same information. That part of life has passed me by and I'm happily retired. But it's something to think about because those folks, they're not going to jeopardize their jobs and their profession to come down and either say yay or nay. You probably have a better chance of folks coming in and say, no, we don't want it. But rather than doing that, they're just going to stay quiet. Privately talking to people, just a comment, do you support cannabis stores or do you support cannabis in the city of Lakeport? And I'll bet you 90% or better are going to say no, but they won't come down here. The folks that do, you stand a better chance of seeing them. Regardless of which direction you go, if you're going to have storefront facilities, I would feel very strongly and urge you not to have on-site consumption. In my opinion, you're asking for more problems than what just the storefront itself is going to cause. I personally feel that the city is kind of looking down the road at lots of dollars. This is a serious situation for the city. And one of the other things that was said, I know it was said the last meeting, was we can say no now, and then we can go ahead and modify that as that comes along. But if we say, yeah, we're gonna allow 1, 2, 3, 5, 10 storefronts or businesses into the community, and then down the road, we decide, no, we don't want that many, you're stuck. My thinking is, okay, say no, with the idea that you're still going to look at this thing, but you're not gonna be pressed for time, like you obviously are now. With that, I think I'll go sit down and let you chatter.
Thank you, Stan. Come on up.
Can I just make a comment?
Oh, we should give everyone else a chance first, okay?
Hi, Michael Green. Thank you for so diligently going through the drill down on this. A couple quick points on attachment to page 15. We had previously talked about whether a 5-pound limit on the dried cannabis was going to make much sense. I don't know if we reached consensus on that at the council level, but it seems kind of limiting. And then below that, Roman numeral 8, there's a 50 square foot limit on non-cannabis items. I'm not really sure why that's in there. I mean, on the one hand, you're going to limit it to 5 pounds. On the other hand, you're going to limit them from selling anything else from 50 square feet. So those 2 bullet items, I don't know if they got left in there or just overlooked, but they're kind of problematic for anybody that might want to be doing a retail license.
50 square feet.
As to the last speaker, it is a problematic time in that our industry, such as it is, you do see a lot of home-based occupations right now, and we didn't discuss that specifically during the planning. But I think moving forward, my own personal thing, even though I certainly have been supportive of commercial cannabis activities and all the greatness of it is, I don't see it being a good fit in a residential setting, period. There's a whole lot of things we talk about when we talk about commercial cannabis, the who, what, when, where, why, and how. The where, to me, the state law clearly calls it out. If it's going to be commercial cannabis activity, it's going to be very carefully monitored, track and trace and all of that. I'm not saying that it's physically impossible to do it in a residential setting. It just really kind of goes beyond the idea that these commercial activities, and in a local land use setting, that's why we have zoning laws, right? Commercial activities typically do take place in commercial zoning or industrial zoning or something like that. So I want to celebrate the good that speaker kind of brought up. It kind of represents some of the best of what this industry has. People who are concerned about veterans and stuff like that, people who do bring care into their products. The problem moving forward is the sole proprietors of the world, the home-based occupations of the world. It's not really a good fit for the commercial licensing world and the zoning that's going to go with that. One thing that we didn't talk about at planning and haven't talked about really here is under the state law, there's an exemption for what I call a mini collective now, that a qualified patient or a primary caregiver can serve up to 5 patients, I believe, and be exempt from commercial licensing at the state level. But even a mini collective, and I think that's something we probably should explore to help people bring affordable medicine to people, but even the mini collective concept, I think, probably belongs outside residential. You know, if we're going to have mini grows or something like that, let's find some areas where that might go, that might help facilitate compassionate care, lighten some of the regulatory burden for people that are doing what they're doing in a home setting now, and allow them to kind of explore, hey, I'm doing this, I can't afford to do it all myself, but they might be able to actually share some costs by finding, for example, a certified kitchen in a commercial zone that maybe an individual sole proprietor couldn't be dealing with, but maybe a mini collective could. So it's a business model that we really didn't discuss because it's considered a non-business under state law right now. But there is definitely a wealth of home-based occupations, sole proprietors that are doing kind of compassionate things, that are kind of caught in the middle of the the up-and-coming commercial regulations, which absolutely should stay outside of residential, and then even some of these mini collectives, which I think also should stay outside of residential. But I think there are things we could do to at least explore the option and see if we can facilitate that somehow. And that was it.
Thanks, Michael.
Michael, where did you find the mini collective described? I haven't read that one yet.
Well, that's my term.
You mean the cooperative that's described in SB 94, where
No, because the collective defense itself is going away, but somewhere
Right.
else in MACURSA, it says that a qualified patient or primary caregiver who cares for up to 5 patients is exempt from the state licensing. Now, you'd still have to figure out where, for example, a mini collective would want to go. Like if they're growing 100 plants, you wouldn't want that in a residential either. In a country setting, maybe you put it out on, RR or something like that. So it still becomes a zoning question. What can you do to allow these patients to kind of congregate together, stay outside of the commercial licensing aspect, but still satisfy some of the local zoning and code compliance and stuff like that, so that you don't have a bunch of little home-based occupations all over the map. What can you do to, one, recognize what the mini collective is in the new state law, which is still very confusing, and I haven't seen any local zoning ordinances really tackle that yet. And then, is there interest? So I think you heard at least one person express interest in what can I do, and whether that falls on the mini collective exempt from state licensing, or if they're going to go ahead and pursue a micro business or a cottage license, I don't really know. But it would be interesting at least to explore the opportunity to allow a kind of a group effort that was still compliant with state law, but was exempt from the licensing provisions of MACURSA.
It's another very good point, because I know in SB 94 it does create this new definition around the term cooperative, which is the patients and caregivers coming together collectively to cultivate only for those patients and caregivers. And it has a lot of criteria, but it that limits what they can do. Like, you can't just sell it to a dispensary. It has to be kept within that group to be exempt. But it also, if I remember correctly, allows for a type 6 of manufacturing with non-volatiles. So we're gonna need to sort of figure that one out, because you can't be exempt. Like, where does it come in where the city can mandate or require the necessary safety standards in order to protect the rest of the public if something's exempt from commercial permitting and licensing on a local and state level? So that's yet another complexity that we're going to need to figure out. So, yeah.
And it's fairly nuanced, but it is. Again, we're trying to transition not just the big businesses who are ready to go and have all these great dreams, but the existing industry, such as it is more mom and pop, is a lot of sole proprietors, and is a lot of collectives that are dying under the state law, and yet the smaller version of the collective still continues to exist. And that will be an ongoing discussion at the state level too, I'm sure. But in terms of the local zoning ordinance we're talking about here tonight, we never broached that subject, and I don't know if we get there before January, but it's something to think about.
Yeah. I think that we have a to-do list before us, as this ongoing ordinance, but secondarily, we now have this future to-do list, because one of the things that I'd like to see our council do is and I admire that the Board of Supervisors is taking the same position, is as we progress, we do so slowly and with all due caution, because once we open that door, it's almost impossible to close that door. So I want to make sure once we open that door, we know what we're doing, and we're fairly confident. And it's hard to get a level of confidence at this point when the state regulations keep changing too. So just that word of caution that I'm hoping, I don't know that I conveyed that the last meeting, and so I just really wanted to impart that's where I'm coming from, is I want to make sure when I open one door that we're not going to need to close it in the future. That would bring on all kinds of understandable litigation, because people would be proceeding to apply for these permits in good faith, and then if they become problematic later and we have to close it, it's
Well, we're
it
such
would
a
make
small
sense.
city, it would be difficult for us to deal with.
Right, so all the more reason why we need to be careful as we proceed in the future.
Anyone else from the public?
Melissa Bolton, I'm here wearing two hats. The first as a resident of the county of Lake. I do live outside the city limits, but also as the CEO of the Lake County Chamber of Commerce. I think the underlying current here for the city of Lakeport, from what I can discern, is the concern about, excuse me, dispensaries within the city, retail or otherwise, whether they're in the commercial area or on Main Street. And I've been involved in these sort of discussions at the county level for several years. And dispensaries are always kind of the flashpoint, if you will. So my question is to Councilmember Turner, who wears two hats as well. Where does the county currently stand on dispensaries in the unincorporated areas?
Well, I can't answer officially, of course, because that's
Right.
totally up to the Board of Supervisors. Wearing my county hat, staff has been directed previously by the Board of Supervisors to proceed with developing options to present to the board for their review. And so that's how the Community Development Department has gone forward in creating this large, complex ordinance, because we want to present all the stuff for the board then to make a decision. So to my understanding and my memory, the board has not taken a position on anything yet. They've been listening as we bring them various workshops and things like that, but I would not say that I've received any sort of understanding where the board stands on those.
That's where I thought we were, because I have missed a couple of the more recent meetings. But I think that as the city moves forward and you're looking at just the dispensary portion of everything that you have to consider, that you might keep in mind what could happen in the unincorporated areas, which could alleviate certain situations within the city limits. Only from the standpoint that perhaps the unincorporated area will bear that particular type of business, if you will.
So if I understand it correctly, you're saying that as the supervisors and as the county policy develops, that may relieve some of the pressure locally
Yes,
regarding retail establishments, both medicinal and recreational.
yes.
Okay.
And I should also clarify the fact that the Lake County Chamber Board of Directors has not officially discussed anything that has to do with the city of Lakeport. So I didn't want my comments to be misleading.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you, Melissa. Who's next? Well, any discussion up here while we think about coming up?
I called the mayor of Clear Lake the other day because I was concerned, because of chief and things that have been said. And I asked him in his personal experience, and he's been in, Russ Purdock has been in law enforcement, but he's been the mayor over there. And I asked him how his experience was down there. And the first thing he said to me, he says, well, I'm going to tell you something right now. There's a big difference between Clear Lake and Lakeport. And having said that, he said that that they've only had, to his knowledge, he said that there was one particular burglary or something like that. But he said that all of the people involved with the 3 different dispensaries that they have been extremely energetic in trying to do everything possible to obey and come in alliance and in accordance with all of the laws. They want to pay their taxes. They want to do everything necessary to abide by the laws, rules, and regulations. But he said that in essence there's been no problems with the historical location of those in Clear Lake, and that was some information that I thought we desperately needed, because if it's gonna be, you know, like I said, a wretched hive of, you know, scum and villainy, that's not gonna be a good thing. But if it's just another retail establishment located in C3 or industrial that provides a need, and it has all these regulations, whether it's 10 pounds and it's got 100 square feet or 50 square feet, I don't know, but I thought that was good information that in Clear Lake, which we all consider to have, let's just say, issues, they haven't been a real problem down there. And like I mentioned at the last meeting, that I didn't want to jump to confusion and say that automatically just because we put one in that it's going to be problematic, because these are business people that plan on doing business just like all of the other business people, to do it in a correct and honest fashion and in accordance with all the laws, health and safety and code enforcement and all that stuff. So I just thought that was important information.
Madam Mayor, just Doug Hutchison, our fire chief, is here in the audience. I was wondering if you'd like to speak on the fire department's
Oh,
perspective.
that'd be great. We have not heard from our fire department. Doug, you were hiding at the back?
You know, sometimes I have to leave these things. Yeah, quick getaway. That's what I used to tell my mom in church when I'd sit in the back too.
So before you start, Maria and I, we were just recently at a League Leaders Conference, and we sat with the fire chief from Palo Alto. Is that where he was? So we, and a couple of fire chiefs we talked to about different situations in their city. So I'm so glad you're here.
Okay, well, Doug Hutchison, I'm Fire Chief for the Lakeport Fire Protection District. Manager Solera asked me to come and share some of our thoughts. I've been communicating with a little bit with Kevin about the proposed ordinance. Right now, we're kind of waiting to see what comes down the pipe, really, as much as anybody else does. Our biggest concern, obviously, is any kind of process that's going to involve the solvents. We've already had a situation here in the city where they had a very large quantity of unregistered solvents next to a medical oxygen supply house that left a really large hole. So that's where primarily our, concerns are coming from and stuff like that. So we're just kind of waiting to see which way you go. It looks like, you're going the right path as far as those go. You're keeping the commercial and the industrial areas. There is one section in here where it lists that the Public Works Director would be notified of the list of chemicals and stuff that were on site. We would ask that we also be put on that list. But really that's about it, just as long as they're following all the necessary codes as far as fire code, building code, etc. Until we see more, it's going to be hard to determine what the impact to our permitting process and inspections will be.
Okay.
It's really going to depend on the scale of the operation. Obviously, if we were to go into something like the lady was talking about before, to look at that from our perspective, that's going to take 5 minutes, whereas, a very large scale operation might take hours, or in some cases days. And where's that expertise coming from? Because I can tell you from my background, having come from the military and things like that, it's one thing to walk in, take an inspection class and go and inspect Safeway. It's another thing to walk into a 5-acre indoor aircraft hangar with fueling systems and all kinds of things that, if you've never seen those before, you don't even know what to look for. So we're just kind of in a wait and see attitude right now. And hoping that the law of unintended consequences doesn't come into play too badly. I can tell you from going through this in Washington, one of the things that had to be addressed after they legalized it was protection of the first responders, primarily the volunteers. Unlike other substances that people use that we get calls for and things like that in the home, since one of the primary ways that people utilize cannabis is smoking it, there's a lot of secondhand exposure risk. So Washington had to enact legislation after the fact. They had a situation where a volunteer EMT was in a house. There was a lot of smoke involved, had a secondhand exposure, showed up for his job at UPS the next day, tagged for a test, and his job went bye-bye. And no fault of his own, he's trying to help the community. So the state had to figure out how they were going to provide some immunity and exposure tracking and things like that. And California's going to have to do the same thing. So that's where we're coming from on it right now.
Well, we're concerned about safety for citizens, but also for our firefighters and police. And heard some stories that some firefighters lost their lives in a warehouse situation that went bad. So would you be involved with the inspections, with our planning?
Oh, yes, definitely.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, there isn't a day that goes by that I don't see a story about a extraction lab gone bad, or a grow operation being discovered in a residential area as a result of a fire. Because, you know, when people build a residence, it's not built to the same electrical code as a large indoor grow would be. So, you know, you've got this huge power load, really hot lights, old house a lot of times, and a lot of fires start that way. And firefighters have been killed in those fires. So I think that from the commercial aspect, kind of getting it out into the light, having it permitted, so we know what we're walking into when we get there is the right thing to do. It's like I always tell people, the rattlesnake I can see, I prefer over the one that I can't. So then I know not to step on him. So that's kind of where we're coming from.
So as far as our previous marijuana ordinance that we had, where we allowed growing within all the different confines and electrical and all that kind of stuff, have you or any of your force had any issues regarding any calls on electrical usage that went overboard and that they need to be cited by the administrative citation process? Or
In my time here, we have not had any issues with indoor grows. Clear Lake has had a few, but whether those people were following their ordinance or not, I could not speak to.
Well, yeah, Russ told me that he stole our ordinance and took things out of it because it was so well conceived, because we had the stakeholders and everybody involved. But I just want to see if it leads us to the point where people want to do the right thing and want to be compliant, and they want this to go forward rather than creating an issue for the police, and then the city is impacted with the budgets and so forth, and that creates a negative feeling from all of us here at the city. So I'm just trying to get a feel for how they are doing here so far with what they've had to work with. Thank you.
Yep. One question I had is, does your staff need to have additional training for this type of situations, or are you well trained for it because of the medical marijuana situation to be basically the same?
It's basically the same whether it's medicinal or recreational at this point for us. If there was large-scale commercial operation going in, what we're used to is the illicit systems. I don't know that we have a lot of experience inspecting systems that are designed for this type of thing, legal ones. I mean, usually what we get is something that somebody thinks that they're a chemist put together out of stuff, and I don't know where some of these people went to chemistry school, but yeah. So that's kind of what we're used to dealing with. So the last problem we had on Bevins, that lab was very extensive, very well funded, a lot of high dollar equipment, yet at the same time they were openly venting acetone into the building with no respiratory protection whatsoever. No fire suppression system, and the guy considered himself a chemist. Tried to tell me acetone wasn't a problem because it wasn't like it was flammable or anything.
Well, it would be good for you to work with our staff. We're putting together the fee schedule, it'll be adopted later this month. And like you said, you may have to contract out for inspections, and so that you can let us know what type of buildings we need to, so it'd be really important to connect you with our staff as we do start progressing in that area too.
Absolutely.
Any other questions for Doug?
We can certainly make that change to add the fire chief and fire staff to the record keeping for the solvents.
Okay. Thank you. Thanks, Doug. Okay, so I don't know if there's anyone else that wants to come up and speak.
My name is Gary Reason as an individual, and there was two about the manufacturing of the product. Well, that's not what we're talking about here, and then that being home-based, a small home base. If they are a small home-based business, are they going to be required to notify their neighbors. That says in the city ordinance that if you have a home-based business, that your neighbors are notified.
Well, right now, we don't have anything like that in the ordinance, so we would be looking at making a major change to the residential ordinance to allow it first, and then if we did, Kevin?
Well, speaking to just like a general home occupation permit, not looking at just cannabis, that would require a zoning permit, most likely administratively approved, not something that would need to be reviewed by the planning commission, but it would include a notification to the immediate neighbors.
I just want to clarify that.
But currently, right now, in regards to the commercial cannabis uses, there's none of the uses that are being discussed right now are being considered for residential zone.
Some of the things that we're still discussing is whether to do retail or no retail, and if so, in what zonings.
I understand that. but it's
Industrial, C3, or more, so,
kind of brought up earlier though by one of the speakers, and also
yeah.
just question. So, thank you.
Hey Kevin, what's our definition of immediate? What's that radius?
It's adjacent
Oh, okay.
for zoning permits.
Anyone else from the public?
Well, just to kind of maybe spur
Come on
this,
up.
let's just say that we had the consensus that we were not going to have any retail outlets at all. Would that bring up some public input?
Hello.
Hi, Carrie Smith, longtime resident, and the immediate definition was brought up. I am on the boundary of the C2 and residential, and I'm hearing that as of right now, at least, you're not looking at C2, but I see all the work and the money that's gone into improving our downtown, and I would just hope that we don't have storefronts in C2 and definitely like the 11th Street area. I also just here as a parent, and I mentioned to my 17-year-old, look across the street, honey, that could be a dispensary, and it affected her, it bothered her. So just to consider our kids too. And another consideration, and I know I appreciate all the work you have in front of you, but the question I have is hours of operation if storefronts are allowed. And I think that was it. I just wanted to implore and request that C2 definitely not be an option and keep 11th Street free of storefronts.
So you're saying industrial and C3, and would you do retail or delivery only?
I really am not that prepared to.
Okay.
I haven't looked at it all, but hearing there's a meeting and Mr. Jones, I sat there long enough, but Mr. Jones said, these people aren't here speaking up. So just wanted to be another voice for definitely no C2.
And there are store hours. Do you have them memorized, Kevin? I don't have them memorized.
I don't have them memorized, but I just found them.
Okay, good.
Just right there. So retail days and hours of operations currently are Monday through Sunday, 9 a.m. through 7 p.m.
Thank you.
And when we were talking about it earlier, if you look at the map on the wall, you'll see that C2 is interwoven with industrial and C3, and we were specifically, I think your dad was here, and we made sure that that particular section of C2 would be eliminated, as would be the 11th Street Center, so it would all be this industrial complex. And that's one of the things that we were looking at, was the fact that if we did C2, would it make any difference? Because it's all there together in that same industrial area, but not downtown or anywhere near it. So that was one of the, that's why we're up here today, so. But certainly not on the North Main or on 11th Street.
Thank you.
Not yet.
I have some input here on this dispensary thing because I am in the industry. Deliveries are very dangerous, very dangerous. They hire just whomever, and most of it is youngins, teenage girls, or not teenage, you have to be a certain age, and they go on these deliveries and they get robbed. The dispensaries, safest for everybody involved. You've got control of the dispensary inventory. It's in a brick and mortar. It's the officers can respond to the brick and mortar. I know a lot of dispensary drivers or delivery drivers who have been strong arm robbed, almost killed over what they have. Delivery is very dangerous, very dangerous. And no, I don't think that a dispensary should be on Main Street. I think that we have a place in the community adjacent from Main Street. Norman Rockwell didn't have a green little medical sign on his Main Street. So anyway,
Are you saying you would ban deliveries in overall?
personally, yes, they're dangerous. It's okay, you got a brick and mortar, you've got insurance on the brick and mortar, somebody gets hurt in the parking lot, you got insurance on the brick and mortar. You got a delivery service, all right? We're humans, people are human beings, they are subject to fault. What if the person driving the delivery vehicle hasn't maintained their vehicle? Something happens to it and they hit somebody and kill them. You know, not just this, there's so many variables with the delivery system or service that you cannot control. Talk about moving parts. There's way too much. You've got all this inventory they're carrying out. They just don't go, oh, you ordered an eighth of this, I'm going to bring it to you. No, they've got a kit. So personally, as somebody in the cannabis industry, I think delivery services are dangerous, and I don't think that they serve anybody well.
Thanks, Kimberly.
Good evening. Ruby Jones, the other half of the Jones. I object to any cannabis sales, delivery, or retail. Just want to say that. I also am glad to hear that you've eliminated the 11th Street and the North Main Street area for sales. So that's my opinion.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Ruby. Who else? Any comments while they're thinking about coming up?
There's more to this than meets the eye. That's for sure.
I think that, and I hate to keep referring to the resident expert, Michael Green, but he mentioned in a previous meeting about the numerous different kinds of complications with controlling inventory and tax capture and so on and so forth, and as opposed to being in a location where everything is controlled and we have all these a myriad of all these different types of security issues and cameras and all that kind of stuff, and being located remotely away from the city in a C2, C3 or industrial area. So, but that's not to say that we would get rid of delivery because it's dangerous in some towns. I don't know, but it just seems that there's a lot of benefits to having, if we're going to have one or two. It seems like in that area, it doesn't seem like it would necessarily be the worst thing. And I saw from the beginning that the delivery thing, you know, I mean, it almost reminds me, you see some guys zipping around with, and yeah, they're usually young kids zipping around with their pizzas or whatever, and in and out, you know, racing in and out of parking lots and stuff like that. I mean, I just kind of see that as a little bit sketch, you know. So the brick and mortar thing with insurance and surveillance and all the controls and so forth, and then the 10-pound, 5-10-pound, whatever that happens to be, it just seems like a better way to go to take care of the compassionate care and the veterans and all the different things that we need for the medical marijuana distribution.
Well, remember, deliveries can come from out of the city, correct? So to ban that, would that be very difficult to control?
Well, it could be. Probably
I'm not saying that we should.
I mean,
Well, I'm just trying to think it through. You know, if we said no delivery now, we're burdened with controlling no delivery from anywhere. If there's going to be already deliveries from out of the city, then
Why would we?
why would we not? Yeah, right.
No, I'm not saying that we shouldn't, but I'm just saying that as opposed to the advantages of a dispensary, it has all the advantages of having a stable business environment and all that types of controls and so forth. I just think that, I feel like the dispensary thing is not the evil villain that I once thought it was, the more I hear about it. And I'm speaking completely from someone who's out of the cannabis business completely, never been involved in it. It just seems to me that this would be a decent way to deal with the needs that have been created in our particular municipality in these areas that we decide.
Yeah, I don't think we were trying to, anyone's characterizing it one way or another. I think it's just, it's a rush to figure out how this is all gonna work and what the assessment really is to the city and the burden of what we're gonna have to do. And I think that's why so many cities are just banning it right now. It doesn't mean they're banning it forever. They're banning it to see how it goes, to get more information, to see what the state does. And I think we've been trying to find something that's kind of more in the middle, happy medium. But we can keep adding to it too. You know, we don't have to rush and decide. But we need to start somewhere.
Well, one thing that kind of is with what Kenny says is if, let's say we say that we could have a dispensary, a retail store in the industrial C3, C2 down the lower part of town, you would then automatically see less deliveries, okay, because they can go and get it themselves. And instead of, let's say we say there's no deliveries and somebody says, calls up Ukiah and they deliver it to us, you can't stop that. So it's like maybe one dispensary down here would slow that down some. I don't know.
We don't.
Yeah, that's the problem.
No
We have no data to tell us one way or the other, so
Nothing.
it's just maybes.
Anyone?
Well,
Oh, Maria?
if I could just also add that there are regulations already at the state level that are, they're trying to make it as secure as possible for deliveries. Like you need to be 21 years old. I think they have limitations on no advertising on your car. You have a maximum amount of product of $3,000 that you can transport at any one time. So there are deliveries, they are trying to make them as safe as possible. Additionally, I've heard about if you have a retail establishment, either a medical dispensary or recreational use retail, deliveries are allowed. They're part of that permit. And I've heard about how we can ban storefronts, but I haven't heard any dialogue about banning the delivery aspect of a retail license. We can ban Ukiah coming over here. We can't ban Ukiah driving on Highway 20, but if we wanted to, we could ban out of the city deliveries, but
How do you enforce
exactly.
it?
Yeah.
I mean, the van has no decals on it, no nothing.
Exactly, it's
so how
gonna be
you gonna enforce
nondescript,
it? By
grown
law.
up, with
By
a
law.
small amount, right. So it seems unenforceable to me as
Yeah.
well.
Right. Chief, were you gonna say something?
Just that, we wouldn't, unless we stumbled across that person from Ukiah, we wouldn't know. We would have no way.
I also agree with Kenny about the 5-pound limit. I don't really see a reasonable nexus for requiring such a limit. I don't recall us setting it at a 10-pound limit. I thought
No.
that we just talked about the removal of the 5-pound, which I also agree with, so.
Well, if we're gonna remove the 5-pound, I think we should come up with a thing, because you don't want somebody sitting there with 300 pounds.
Well, but then again, if appropriate, again, going back to the state regulations, they do mandate locking it up to how secure it is going to be, that sort of thing, with the understanding that you're securing your product. And so if we do decide to go with retail establishments, I'd like to treat them like we do other businesses, which enables, we don't restrict individual business people from
So much
making
liquor.
their own individual decisions on their inventory. so they can take advantage of the market prices as they're up and down, and stock up on one, or if they have one that's frequently sold. So anyway, I don't see the need for a limit. I think
It's a
that
bit
is going to be
arbitrary.
modified by the business owner, as an individual business decision. So if we decide to go with retail.
Does that make sense to everyone to take out that limit?
Yeah, you can take out the limit, but what I'm saying as a devil's advocate here is that if I was a thief and I knew that this place has a limit of 100 pounds and this place has no limit whatsoever, and I just know they got 1,000 pounds of stuff, I'm gonna rob that place instead of the 100 pounds.
Well, you wouldn't know, but are you saying?
I'm just saying as a devil's advocate,
Yeah.
but we could remove the limits.
Remove the limits. And then what about the C2? Are we taking out all of C2?
I don't think we made any decision at all on that. I think
Okay,
the only
so that's
thing that
still
we were
up in the
discussing
air.
was for sure, we were taking out 11th Street
And North.
and North Main, where the pet shop in that area is down by Renee's. And I just, that was the consensus that I felt at the last time. And I didn't see any reason necessarily to restrict C2, because it's all interwoven with C3 and industrial already. So it's like, I mean, if you wanted to or not, I don't see what the advantage would be to getting that out of there. It just narrows the amount of opportunities there.
Kevin, is that the map on the wall down there?
That's not the most
Not the
recent
most
map.
recent map?
But it's pretty close.
It's pretty close.
Okay.
So all the pink that everybody sees down there,
That's C2.
that's C2, and you see that there's blue and there's red on each end, and so it would be mixed right in there. And the other two pinks that are up above is 11th Street and North Main, those would be gone. So it'd just be all concentrated right down there in the industrial areas outside, far outside of the city of Lakeport downtown.
What is High Street?
High Street Village is C2.
But it's,
But it's in a
zone.
It's in a buffer
A
zone,
buffer
so it's
zone, so
exempt.
exempt.
What was the reason for the buffer zone on that area? I forgot.
That's,
Distance from the
I think there's a large family daycare in that area.
Okay.
Because the school buffer doesn't come quite down
No,
that far
that's
south.
further north. Okay.
And that's not a park, so the only other way to be is a daycare, preschool.
Well, as I have heard it since the very first time that we've been in here, I have not had one person, with the exception of maybe Ron Rose, come up and ask to have dispensaries in Lakeport. And far be it from me to be the person to say, well, let's put dispensaries in. If no one cares that we pull it out, I'd be more than happy to take it out for the time being. If no one's going to come up and say, hey, I think we should have them. And that would eliminate the delivery and the retail locations until further notice, because I haven't heard anybody come up and say, hey, I think it's a great thing, we need to do it. I'm asking you to do it. I've had numerous people say, I don't want it, and I'd rather not have any at all, so.
I did have a citizen say, why would you do it unless someone brought you a good proposal?
Well,
No.
that would be part of it, that would be necessary, but I haven't heard anybody come to the
But,
podium.
and nobody's coming, but, you're saying we could add it later.
Yeah, I mean, if nobody's hot to go and coming up here and banging the rostrum saying, hey, look, we need dispensaries, then I'm not gonna say put it in and maybe somebody will wanna do one, and I would be the last person to do that.
Kind of like
I-
the fortune teller version,
Yeah.
how we modified the ordinance as the need arose.
Yeah,
Or as we got
yeah,
it.
and I don't see any compelling need to put it in, so then I don't have any problem leaving it out, but as far as all the other commercial applications, I don't have a problem putting them in C2 and industrial and C3, and then we don't have to worry about the dispensary nor the delivery, I would imagine. Which
Okay.
kind of goes back to what you guys
What
came
we
up
started
originally.
with? What
How
does that
about-
micro business look like now with those new amendments? It's not the same as
Yeah,
when we started.
there's a significant change in the micro business with the new temporary regulations from the Department of Agriculture, different, public health. Micro business used to sort of seem like a model, like an agritourism, like you go out to your vineyards and you've got this winery and you've got a tasting room. So you go and you get to learn about vineyard management and winemaking, and you get the tasting room just like that, and it's this sort of agri model. They added distribution to the micro business, and now instead of being limited to the three, the cultivation, the manufacturing, and the retail, they like turned it around, and so now you have to do at least of 3 of the 4, which is cultivation, distribution, or cultivation, manufacturing. They added distribution and retail. So the distribution factor changes the whole type of permit on its ear, really, because it doesn't say you're limited to, so distribution is a very important license type at the state level, because it's the distributor who accepts the cannabis products from the licensee, secures the testing, holds on to it while it's getting tested, is in control of that batch, and then is responsible for passing it on then to the next licensee. And so by adding distribution to a microbusiness license, you're increasing the land use impact significantly, because it's no longer just clientele coming to visit your establishment to see what you do and learn about it and buy some stuff at your retail store. You now could have, conceivably, cultivators from all over bringing in their cannabis to be manufactured at your facility. So it's a much larger scale potential now, and I think, thank you for reminding me, because I wanted to make sure that we're cognizant of that moving forward. If we do permit micro-business licenses, we're going to want to limit them to the areas where we can control the impact no matter what level it is. And so this distribution, we're going to want to make sure that micro-businesses are located in areas where we would permit distribution. So let's keep that in mind.
So tell me again, the distribution, is that delivery? Or does it have to be retail?
Well, part of, one of the possible sort of segments of a micro business would be the retail. That's where you get interaction, that's where you come into contact with the public. It's where you could be doing your deliveries. It's like a typical retail license. Distribution is not. You don't interact with the public. You interact with the lab staff, or the cultivators who are bringing you their product, or the manufacturers who are bringing you their product, things like that. So it's not public access, but it could have a significant increase in the non-public or the non-retail segment of the industry at that location.
So it's more industrial?
We have to consider where we
Business
want
to
to place it.
business.
Yeah, it's
Business
business
to
to
business.
business, it's a licensee to licensee
Okay, now I gotcha.
permit. So we'll chew on that one too. While we're at it.
Anyone from the public, now that we've had a little discussion up here? Anything else?
Just want to follow up that nobody's knocking down your door to open a dispensary. What about the people who want to use the dispensary? I've asked for it. I don't want to go to Clear Lake. No offense to Clear Lake. And no offense to the businesses there, but I think we can do better. I don't want to go to Hopland. They have a lovely facility there. I think we can do a really good facility there. I think we should serve the patients who do live in Lakeport. They are not going to stand the fear. Me, what do I care, right? Everyone knows who I am, but
They
Yeah.
all came in during the medicinal marijuana when we did our residential ordinance.
yeah, I'm thinking of Hanford, right? They just approved 3 big box cultivation things, but God forbid they sell 1 blade of grass in the city of Hanford. You know, if all you're thinking about is regulating this so you can milk some cash cow, please don't. You know, if you can't establish safe access in the city of Lakeport, stop talking about it. You know, just ban everything. I've been down that road before, but to me it's very disingenuous to talk about all this stuff and you know, not establish the most critical point in the supply chain, which is the retailer. You know, if you don't want a bunch of home-based occupations, if you don't want weed getting sold outside the high school, wherever it's going to go, stand up and take the rightful spot of the city and saying we are going to be part of the solution. Not just the parts that we like, or just not the parts that we're not getting pushback on. Seed to sale. And so I think retail doesn't have to be a big part of it, but if we ever do talk about a cannabis tax, sales, obviously retailers are going to be a bigger chunk of the economic development that would go with this. I just don't even know how to express my frustration adequately in hearing it, and I've heard it play out time and time again in city after city, county after county. If you're going to explore the parts of it that you only like and cherry pick a portion of the regulated cannabis environment, please don't. Please take notice of the patients again. We're not going to stand up here and beg for this stuff. Help defund the black market, and you'll only do that by establishing retail sales. Thank you.
Hey, Michael. If you don't mind, what is your position on recreational or adult use? Because you mentioned access to patients, safe access to patients as being a priority. But given the other type of retail, what's your position on that?
There's a better tax bump for one. You're going to be able to tax adult use, social, recreational, whatever you call it, better than you will be able to do medical. I can't answer that. For example, Fresno, where I'm from, they just banned everything they could recreational, and yet they're finally taking a look at allowing safe access to medical dispensaries in the city of Fresno. And they actually they're going to get an RFP closed tomorrow on a consultant to help them get through some of that. I think what they're going to do is, again, they keep stumbling over some of the social issues. Obviously, people are not a big fan of things in the Central Valley. But in their defense, they've never had a regulated environment. Everything they know about medical marijuana is bad. So they need to take some baby steps toward the medical market. But the social dynamic is kind of interesting too. Year after year after year, these patients don't look sick enough. I see 20-something kids with bad backs. Everyone's abusing the medical system. Now we finally have a law that acknowledges both medicinal use and adult use. Hey, you know what, that kid doesn't look sick, And so now the discussion for parents is a little bit different. It might be similar to alcohol and tobacco. It's like, I don't want you using that stuff, at least till you're 21 and you moved out of the house, and then make your own decisions. So Prop 64 didn't really solve the social debate that's going to be ongoing. What's medicinal, what's adult use? But in terms of the state licensing, it acknowledges that both happen. And just based on all the debates I've been living through for the past 7 years, most people believe that the majority of people who are getting the medical marijuana cards now are probably more social users or recreational users. So why not acknowledge that? Whether you're a social user or a patient, you deserve safe access. Whether you're a social user or a patient, you should have lab-tested products. You should pay taxes. You should reward businesses that follow the rules, and not spend your money by default to people who don't follow the rules. I don't really know how to answer the social debate. The tools are there now at the state level. You can license medical only. If you want to go all Fresno, you can go big boxes only. If you want to go all Hanford, if you want to put aside all the technical stuff and the zoning and the stuff and actually have a little debate about what do we want here. If you just can't get your head around any type of retail, but you could settle for medical only, that'd be a start, if you're not ready to go recreational. But it gets kind of confusing because there are two very distinct markets now. And I think both markets deserve safe access.
Thank you.
Anyone else? The retail is going to be taxed like in the 30% range, and I guess that is really, really high. The league was saying that sweet spot's somewhere around 10% to avoid the black market, and 30% just from the state, and then local taxes, whatever areas have in their local area, it's going to push it even higher, which is just kind of an outrageous tax for any business to deal with. I just thought that was interesting. So, any further discussion?
Now, was that on medical marijuana or
Well, no,
recreational?
retail.
On recreational.
Right.
Well, it sounds like in his frustration, and I can really seem to feel your pain with something you're so passionate about, and then somebody just seems like a careless disregard for your point of view, that maybe Michael's giving us a compromise where maybe we could do medical where the onerous tax rate isn't so high, and we provide for the, the compassionate care that and keep people from having to drive to Clear Lake and wherever they have to go. Maybe that would be, and then we can move forward from there in the future, but that might be a compromise. And we know that we're only taking care of medical marijuana patients, or so-called medical marijuana patients. That might be a good compromise, and it doesn't slam the door on access. And I agree with the fact that they should have safe access and tested access and stuff like that, and I think that would be a good thing, and maybe that would be a good compromise. George?
That's a starting point.
Any other discussion? Anyone else from the public?
Hi, Michael Froyo. Hey, I just wanted to ask, after what Kenny just said, I'm curious to know, is medical taxed at all? Isn't that tax exempt? I'm not sure about that.
There's no sales tax, that's for sure.
No, I believe it's the
Sales
tax.
tax.
There's no sales tax.
So no.
No. Well, there sure is tax on Sudafed and all that kind of stuff, I know.
Okay, well, should we conclude the discussion?
So, Kevin, basically, this is all about board legal, non-Brown Act discussion, but now when we come back on the 19th, people that have heard that, let's say that we were considering not having dispensaries, if they come pounding in here, then we can discuss that, and we can revisit all of the things that we've discussed today.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that is your public hearing,
Yeah.
that's noticed.
This is
for
just
that
to kind of
session.
trying to flesh out some of our ideas, and I think that we've
Get
made
more information.
yeah, which is exactly what we wanted to do.
If I can just clarify, that, there are required 2 readings of an ordinance before it can be adopted. So if there are substantial changes to the ordinance on the 19th, we will have to bring it back one more time for a final read. It won't necessarily, it won't have to be another public hearing, but we'll need another meeting.
So will we need to do that before the end of the year?
We can only adopt an ordinance at a regular meeting. So
Okay.
we won't, I don't believe we'll have another regular meeting for the end of the year.
Right.
Fortunately, based on the emergency regulations that came out, the state's not going to be issuing these temporary licenses until they contact the local jurisdiction.
Okay.
And the local jurisdiction has 60 days to say, sorry, this applicant doesn't have a license. So
Okay.
we do have some room there
Okay.
based on the emergency regulations, which is helpful.
Did we discuss all the things under the section that you brought?
That was going to be my next question.
I don't know, do we want to talk about those items?
That's up to the council. I mean, looking at them, I don't have any.
If you want to, there are a lot of little housekeeping kind of things, right?
Yeah, nothing really big. Just the word dispensary is going away. It's either going to be medicinal retail or adult use retail.
Okay.
And we looked at that, it shows up maybe a handful of times.
Mhm.
To remove it is not a big deal, because I mean, it's usually followed by the word retailer anyway, so
Okay.
that would be a really easy housekeeping
Okay.
measure.
I personally found the term commercial cannabis uses confusing because that's planneries, actually, a use. So I talked to him about switching it out for commercial cannabis activities.
Okay.
So that people reading our ordinance don't have to interpret it into planneries. We were just missing a word, I think it was a verb or something like that on one line.
Yeah.
Add the phrase excluding micro business with retail. No idea why. That was like 2 weeks ago. Do you remember where was that?
Yeah, well, that was because micro business is pretty specific as to what can and cannot be allowed, and this was just making it more consistent with those state regulations.
Oh, okay, good, yeah, that was a clarification. Remove the reference to the Lake County Ag Commissioner, that was inadvertently left in there, and when I asked our Ag Commissioner if he was aware of that, he was definitely not in favor of that staying in there.
And that should have been removed. The Planning Commission did have some alternative language that we add in there to remove that from there.
The next one, I just noticed there was a little bit of a tweak from the way we had commercial cannabis manufacturing, so I just suggested that we mirror the state definition so everybody's on the same page. And, it had testing and included in microbusiness, which is not one of the permits licensed by the state within the microbusiness, so I requested that.
Take that out.
Clarified. That's it.
Did you want to discuss the special events or anything like
Yeah, that was another one up on top there too.
Oh,
Yes.
special events. Okay, so in the new regulations, there is now a license, or I don't think they're calling it a license, but it's like, it's a special permit for you to be this event coordinator, kind of like Emerald Cup for cannabis events. And we haven't really talked about that at all. Additionally, I'm not entirely clear, because these events can only take place on fairgrounds or agricultural district lands, which all seem to be fairgrounds, but I'm not really clear if there are any other non-fairground ag district lands. And so
And that's state property.
it is state property. However, it does say in the regulations that if you are to hold a local cannabis event at a state fairgrounds, you must be in compliance with local regulations. So the county's already, in our draft ordinance, took a position that those were going to be prohibited, but it's not county territory. It's actually adjacent and surrounded by city property. So that's something that we may want to consider. I know that when I spoke with someone from the fairgrounds, they weren't sure. They were taking a wait and see, but then the Record B article came out with some pretty clear quotes from the Fair Board saying, no, we prohibit it, or maybe it was the other way around. Anyway, if we could get some clarification about that.
Well, we did get clarification. They're currently the Fair Board is prohibiting it, but that may not
Okay.
always and forever be the case. So
Then it would make me comfortable if we also banned it. We can always change it later, but given the litigation that's already taking place in the state for areas of local zoning ordinances that have permissive zoning ordinances, that's causing confusion at a state level, because a permissive zoning ordinance means that unless it's explicitly allowed as a use, it's not allowed. And Lake County, and a lot of our zoning ordinances are permissive zoning ordinances. There is a case currently where there was a zoning ordinance allowing for medicinal dispensaries or dispensaries, and someone sent in an application for a recreational retail. The city denied it based on the fact that it was not in their zoning ordinance. That person then sued, and that is the reason, that's one of the main reasons why the League of California Cities is recommending strongly that for local jurisdictions who don't have anything on their books addressing every single license, to either figure out, either allow it or prohibit it. So that way, it's very clear when the state is looking at our zoning ordinance, it's very clear to them what we do and do not allow. So that's why I'd like us to ban the events in the state fairgrounds and any additional possible agricultural district lands that could exist somewhere. Yeah. So that way we'll be very clear, we'll be synchronized with the position of the fairgrounds. And we can always change it later if we want to, but we need to seek that kind of clarity when we're giving a message to the state about what we will and will not allow.
yeah, it can become a placeholder and it takes us out of the permissive category.
Exactly.
Okay, so I think we covered everything now.
I would, just going back to some of Maria's other suggestions, was there, council feel that all those were appropriate?
Right,
Okay.
you guys, yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, so we've covered everything. I think we still have it nailed down. Retail sales. Does everyone feel like we covered everything in this item? Any other conversation?
I think the only other one that we maybe fully haven't discussed is that second bullet point after the special events, discuss the state's creation of a couple new cannabis manufacturing licenses. We talked a little bit about it in regards to home occupations, but the N and P licenses of 12. I mean, I think the direction from that last meeting was looking at, those are a little less intensive manufacturing type uses. Maybe they're permitting them in other areas outside of just C3 and industrial. Maybe I don't want to put words in the council's mouth, but I believe that was the direction the discussion was heading at the last meeting. So I mean, just in a nutshell, right now the manufacturing licensing categories can be broken down into 4 pieces. You have the volatile solvents piece, the manufacturers using volatile solvents, and then you have manufacturing uses that are for extractions using mechanical methods or non-volatile solvents. And then you have the type N, which is for manufacturers that produce edible products or topical products and using infusion processes or other types of cannabis products other than extracts or concentrates. And then type P is for manufacturers that only package or repackage cannabis products or relabel the cannabis product container. So that you're both type N and type P are, lesser manufacturing categories. So we can leave them there and discuss them in the next one as well. I mean, if there's more public discussion, we haven't seen a whole lot of public discussion on, those smaller manufacturers, other than tonight where we started talking about the home occupation aspect of it.
So if you had a micro business, it would be under one of those types?
No, that's separate from micro business.
Okay.
So since it is a manufacturing permit, it could be included, couldn't it?
Yeah, correct.
Okay. So what do you need from us on that?
No, I just want to interject it in there.
Okay.
I think it's probably best to, hold that one for the public hearing.
Okay. Any questions? Okay, what else, Kevin?
That's it. I think we hit all the other ones.
Okay. Anything else? Anyone from the public? Last chance? Okay. Good discussion. We're going to move on.
Well, we have other stuff.
So just for the public benefit, the next discussion on this will be December 19th.
Yes, December 19th will be the public hearing.
6
So-
weeks.
What?
6
Oh,
o'clock.
6 o'clock,
6
the
o'clock.
regular council meeting.
Next, we're going to talk about the wastewater enterprise revenue bonds. Nick?
Good evening, Madam Mayor, City Council. Before you are 3 different resolutions, 2 for the city and 1 for the agency board. And they include the legal documents related to funding the USDA wastewater project that has been taking place since 2013. Just recently, we've gone ahead and wrapped up all the work related to those projects, and now need your approval to go ahead and sell these bonds to USDA in the amount of $3,433,000 to essentially pay back the city for front-loading these sewer-related projects. And in the staff report, there's a summary of all the financing documents. I think you can take comfort in understanding that back about a year ago, I think in November of 2016, the council approved essentially the same type of deal for the water project. exact same deal, just in the sewer fund.
And the interest rate, 2 point, I can't find it.
The interest rate is 2.125.
Yay!
And then we also had almost $1 million in grant that's not part of this, that the USDA
Correct.
provided for those projects.
The grant portion was $740,000.
Okay, great. Any questions?
Did you highlight the amount of money that will be saved by doing that somewhere in here and I missed it?
By issuing the bond?
Yeah, by going from the previous rate to the lower rate.
This is a different one.
This is a separate bond issue from the refinance that we've been also talking about at the same time. This is an original issue of bonds to be sold to USDA to fund, to reimburse the city for the project.
It was the projects that we approved
Oh, right.
like 3 or 4 years ago, and we don't get paid back from USDA until all the projects are done.
Oh, I see.
So we've been using the city's, the water account didn't have enough money to fund it as it went along, so we had to get a bridge loan to do the water project, and then we got paid at the end. The sewer account was able to fund the projects, which now we're desperately needing to get refunded by the USDA to reimburse us for those costs. And so, but it's like a 4-year process because there were so many projects that were done, and so we had to wait till all of them are closed and completed before we could go in and get
Fascinating how that
federal.
works.
Yeah. So yeah, so most of the time you do have to get a bridge loan, but we were, but that's expensive. So we had to with the water, but with the sewer we were able to make that happen without getting the bridge loan.
Okay, any questions?
Well, basically, we want to authorize these people to go out and sell the bonds to get our money back.
Yeah, the city essentially, we're selling the bonds to USDA.
But we're guaranteed that interest rate that was quoted to us. And which is a good thing that even our other one that we just refinanced, it's really starting to go up now, the interest rates, and they're not, right now they're not even allowing private placement, the new rules coming in. So we did everything in good timing and unless they change that, but that's what it's looking like it's going to, no private placing. So timing was really good for everything.
Anyone from the public? Okay, we have, sitting as the Lakeport City Council, a suggested motion.
Is there numbers to go plugged in there?
No, we'll have to fill those in.
Oh, so those are going to be filled in later?
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, because the documents haven't been fully produced. Well, Madam Mayor, I move to adopt a resolution number to be announced 2017 adopting the USDA RUS Bulletin 1780-27 loan resolution and II resolution number something to be announced later, 2017, approving a trust agreement, installment sale agreement, and grant agreement and certain other documents in connection with the authorization, preparation, sale, and delivery of municipal financing agency of Lakeport, Series 2017 wastewater enterprise revenue fund, and authorizing and directing certain actions with respect thereto. Is there a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Now, do you want to try it?
We have a second motion, sitting as the Board of Directors of the Municipal Financing Agency of Lakeport.
Okay, Madam Mayor, I move to adopt resolution number JPA number to be announced, 2017, approving a trust agreement, installment sale agreement, assignment agreement, and certain other documents in connection with the authorization, preparation, sale, and delivery of municipal financing agency of Lakeport, Series 2017 wastewater enterprise revenue bonds, and authorizing and directing certain actions with respect thereto.
Second.
That's really good. Thank you. We have a motion and a
Slower.
second.
A little slower, but good.
I know. I'm not a Kenny.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Let's see, next we have a new police detective classification. Kelly?
I'm gonna go up here just 'cause
Okay.
I don't like to talk to George and Kenny.
I noticed that. Santa Claus will reward you.
What's that?
Santa Claus will reward you.
Oh, goody. Good evening. Before you this evening is a request to approve a new police detective classification and reclassify one of the police officer positions allocated in the budget to police detective. Over the past several years, the council has done a lot to improve the city's ability to recruit and retain quality sworn personnel. However, we did come across sort of an inequity within the classification system where our police detective isn't really quite earning the market rate that is deserved. And this could become a problem in retaining or recruiting a new one. The way it's set up right now is that the police officers can apply with the police chief and take the police detective assignment on for whatever amount of time they agree to, usually it's like 3 years, and they get a 5% stipend. And what we were finding is that the level of experience you need to have that is about the same as one of our police sergeants would be. So you need somebody that's equal in that level of experience, but the pay isn't equal. So what we're looking to do is approve that as a whole separate job classification, not an assignment given to an officer. Although we would like to still retain the ability to assign officers if we had the staffing level and could start bringing them in as well. But that's kind of a separate side issue. So basically, that's what we're requesting, that the council approve. The job description is attached. The pay scale is listed. And we would then have the ability either to reclassify an existing officer to that position or recruit somebody. Do you have any questions? I feel like I went through that fast.
Thank you, Kelly, it was perfect.
Okay.
Any questions?
One question, do we have an officer now that is being used as a detective?
Yeah.
Yes, we do.
Okay.
And the reason we wanted to keep that, we're not going to eliminate the other ones because if we get officers that continue to learn more about the detective trade, we need more of that backup eventually. So we'd like to keep both the programs going.
Okay, I understand.
Yeah.
Well, I just think that this particular type of move is essential if we're going to try and keep qualified people interested or recruited into our city, because of the fact that there's this movement to take the benefits of all the great training that we offer here and to siphon off people in various departments and take them away. And we need to try and do the best we can with the resources that we have to try and offer the best possible package without doing damage to the budget and so forth. I think it's very important that we be prudent in trying to pick the right number, and I think this is a move in the right direction.
I also think this will encourage people to move up the ladder within the police force and stay longer. So, yeah, I think it's a good move too.
Anyone from the public? Okay. There's no other discussion. We have a suggested motion.
Madam Mayor, I move to approve the new classification of a police detective with a salary range of 43.6, earning $4,780 to $6,012 per month. I also move to reclassify one of the police officer position from the 2017-18 budget to a police detective.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you.
Next, we've got Doug with a roller purchase.
Madam Mayor, Council, before you is a request from the Public Works Department to asking Council to authorize the city manager to sign a purchase order and the purchase agreement required for the purchase of a new Ham HD14 VV roller. This is a budgeted item. It's already included in this year's budget, We're just requesting authorization to go ahead and make that purchase.
Any questions?
It just seems like every time you come in here, you've just worn out another piece of equipment. Of course, this one is relatively young. This one's only like, what, 21 years old? Most of the other stuff you've worn out is 35 and 40 and 50 years old, so.
This one will also get a lot more road done quicker
Yeah.
so that we can
Anyway.
get our streets done.
That was council's direction.
So originally, last meeting, you said you were going to get about a $20,000 savings so that we could add that to the dump truck.
Yes, it
I'm
comes
seeing
out.
there's an 11,871.45 discount. Is that the savings we were looking at, or is that something different?
No, actually, the savings is going to be a little over $17,000 when it all shook out. We went from a purchase price of $80,000 to a purchase price of $62,748.75. And that remaining balance between that $62,748.75 will be applied towards a dump truck.
So what kind of talking did you have to do to get the 90% rollover of the rental? Did you like kind of give them the high five, say, I will be buying from you if you take good care of me on this issue? Because I thought that was a pretty sweet deal.
Yeah, actually, that's the same company that we purchased our grinder from quite a number of years ago. And we've had a pretty good relationship with them. They come up and give us update trainings. And when I told them that, that we were going to be looking to purchase, and that we were looking for any incentive that any company was willing to offer, they came back with that incentive.
Silver tongue W.
So it was very generous of them to do that.
When it says, this amount of money for the freight and pre-delivery inspection and training, is the freight going to be to here, or is the freight going to be to their shop?
No, that's FOB here in Lakeport.
Okay. And so we're renting a roller from them now, right?
Correct.
And so they'll bring our roller and take theirs back, right?
Actually, we'll probably keep, the roller that we have now came with 0 hours on it.
Uh-huh.
And our staff has become very familiar with that roller. And so my recommendation is we keep the one that we have, which has very low hours on it. It doesn't even have 100 hours on it right now. And versus trying to do some kind of a swap.
So in other words, it's more of a purchase of the one we're renting.
This will roll over to the purchase of the one that we're renting, yes.
Huh.
So there won't be any delivery charge, it's already here.
Well, the delivery charge was for when it was delivered. So we're recouping 90% of what all of the rental rate was, which included the delivery fees, so.
That's good.
Well, if there's nothing else,
Anyone from the public? Go, Kenny, go.
move to authorize city manager to sign the associated purchase order and purchase agreement for a 2017 Ham model HD-14-BV double drum vibratory roller.
Second. We have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you very much.
So this is a special meeting agenda. We're done unless anyone has anything.
Oh, I wanted to bring some stuff up.
Oh, really? Margaret?
Can I make a comment? Yeah, I guess there's a little bit of confusion. Some of public members thought we were having a meeting tomorrow night also, but this was in place of tomorrow night's meeting, so I just wanted to make sure that the media had that, covered. And I want to thank council because the agenda became much more cumbersome with the the cannabis on it. So we were some of us are going to be gone. Like 3 of us are going to be gone. So appreciate council accommodating that. I really appreciate that, and just want to make sure the public's aware of that. And then while we're gone, Brad Rasmussen will be the acting city manager this week for the city. So thank you.
Okay, yeah.
One other thing is, the 7th is Pearl Harbor Day. They do have the thing down here at the park to come and celebrate
nice.
that. And also, if I remember correctly, they are going to, right after that, dedicate the mural from the Main Street Association.
Oh, they are?
That's what I heard the last time I was at a meeting, but I don't know if they changed their mind.
Okay. Anything else? Okay, meeting adjourned.